The workshop was quiet, but the silence wasn't calm. It was the kind of silence that comes before something historic begins. A blacklisted hypercar sat in front of them, one of the most advanced machines ever built, and yet it looked vulnerable, broken, exposed, and completely abandoned by the very company that created it. Mat Armstrong had already heard the warnings. Bugatti wouldn't sell parts. No dealership support. No technical guidance. The chassis number blacklisted. A machine worth millions, effectively cut off from its own identity. But standing there in Miami, surrounded by tools and uncertainty, that didn't stop him. It only made the challenge more irresistible. Just weeks earlier, this entire story almost never happened. Mat had traveled to evaluate two potential projects, a Ford GT in Dubai and this crashed Bugatti Chiron Pur Sport in Miami. On paper, the Ford GT made far more sense. Easier to source parts. Less risk, less controversy. But the Bugatti carried something else. A sense of impossibility. And in Mat's world, impossibility is often the starting point. Bugatti had already made their position clear. They didn't want the car repaired outside their control. They wanted it returned to France. They wanted the car destroyed and replaced. The numbers they quoted were staggering. Headlights alone costing €150,000. A bonnet at €50,000. A front bumper at €80,000. And those were just visible parts. The deeper damage was still unknown. Despite all that, the car stayed listed at auction. The bidding started quietly, then quickly escalated. $1.5 million. Then 1.6. Mat wasn't even planning to bid. He was watching out of curiosity. Then the reserve appeared. $2 million minimum. It sold on approval at $1.6 million. But the biggest twist came next. The winning bidder wasn't a collector. It wasn't a dealership. It was the original owner, FXAlexG's. After insurance had paid him out, he bought his own crashed Bugatti back. Final cost, $1.9 million with fees. For many people, that decision made no sense. But for Alex, it wasn't about logic. It was about connection. This wasn't just another car. It was his second Chiron Pur Sport, a machine tied to memories, and he wasn't ready to let it disappear. So he called Mat, not to ask if it could be fixed, but to ask if they could try together. Mat didn't hesitate. A Bugatti rebuild without risking his own money. A chance to learn everything about the most complex road car ever built. And millions of people ready to watch. It wasn't just a project. It was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Before touching anything, Alex contacted Bugatti directly. Their first offer came back at $1.7 million for repair. Then, surprisingly, they lowered it dramatically, around $600,000 to $700,000 for a complete rebuild, including new transmission and carbon monocoque. Essentially a brand new car. The discount raised questions. Why such urgency? Why reduce the cost by over $1 million? It felt less like a repair offer and more like a request to regain control. Once the car returned to Bugatti, there would be no transparency, no timeline, no guarantee. Alex decided against it. Instead, the car would be rebuilt outside the factory, something almost nobody had attempted. The first time Mat saw the car again, the restrictions were gone. Alex owned it outright. That meant they could begin. The windscreen was smashed deliberately to start removal. It felt wrong, but necessary. Surprisingly, despite the visible damage, the car still ran. Warning lights flooded the dashboard. Transmission errors. Airbag faults. Coolant warnings. Engine misfire alerts. But the W16 still came alive. The sound filled the workshop like a fighter jet starting up. A reminder that beneath the damage, the heart of the Bugatti was still beating. They transported it to CV Customs in Miami. The first real test wasn't mechanical, it was digital. Could they even communicate with the car? Mat plugged in diagnostic tools carefully. The scan worked. Engine faults cleared instantly. But 7 transmission faults remained. Passive, but persistent. They wouldn't disappear. That was the first sign the damage ran deeper than cosmetic panels. The teardown began slowly. Carbon fiber everywhere. Even the wiper arms were featherlight. Every panel underneath the bonnet crafted for weight saving. Mat handled everything cautiously. Every broken piece would become another impossible part to replace. Wheels removed. Suspension exposed. The engineering looked flawless. The carbon tub was perfect. But behind the beauty, the reality emerged. The front monocoque showed damage. The aluminum horseshoe structure, a signature Bugatti element, was twisted beyond recognition. Radiators crushed, mounts bent, 4 cooling systems compromised. Still, measurements showed something promising. The chassis alignment remained true. The impact had crushed forward but hadn't twisted the core. That meant repair, not replacement, might be possible. The deeper they went, the bigger the discovery became. Oil stains, cracked housings, transmission casing split on both sides. The kind of damage that normally ends projects instantly. Bugatti would replace the entire drivetrain. But Mat didn't have that option. He would have to rebuild it. Piece by piece, the car was stripped. Fasteners everywhere, thousands of them, more than any car Mat had worked on. Each removed bolt felt like uncovering another layer of complexity. Radiators removed, carbon panels stacked, wiring exposed, and still, the scale of the challenge grew. Mat visited a Bugatti dealership hoping to buy simple components, even a windscreen. The answer was immediate. They couldn't sell parts without the car physically in their shop. They needed to verify through factory computers. No exceptions, no individual sales. The message was clear. This rebuild would happen without official help. Back in Miami, the team prepared for fabrication. The mangled aluminum structure would need to be recreated, radiators repaired, carbon fiber patched, transmission rebuilt. Everything would rely on skill, not manufacturer support. The Bugatti sat disassembled, but no longer defeated. It was becoming something else, a test, not just of engineering, but of independence. Because this wasn't just about fixing a car anymore. It was about proving something. That even the most exclusive machines in the world, even those blacklisted and abandoned, can still be brought back by determination alone. As the lights dimmed in the workshop and tools rested for the night, the Chiron Pur Sport remained unfinished. Panels removed, structure exposed, transmission cracked open like a puzzle no one had solved before. But one thing was certain. This rebuild had already crossed a line. It wasn't just another project. It was a statement. And when the engine finally runs again, if it runs again, it won't just mark the return of a Bugatti. It will mark the moment a blacklisted hypercar proved it didn't need a factory to live again. The moment the transmission housing came fully into view, the atmosphere inside the workshop shifted. What had started as a challenging rebuild suddenly turned into something far more serious. The casing wasn't just scratched or dented, it was fractured. Both sides showed visible cracks, and traces of oil had spread across surrounding components, leaving no doubt that the impact had transferred force far deeper than anyone initially expected. Mat didn't say much at first. He just studied it, because when you're looking at damage on a Bugatti Chiron Pur Sport, every observation carries weight. These aren't parts you simply replace from a shelf. These are components that define whether the entire project continues or ends. And yet, instead of stepping back, Mat leaned in closer. The plan began forming almost immediately. If Bugatti wouldn't supply parts, then the only option left was rebuilding what existed. That meant repairing aluminum structures, reconstructing mounting points, and potentially welding sections that were never meant to be touched outside the factory. It wasn't just difficult, it was unprecedented. As the teardown continued, the extent of the front-end damage became clearer. The aluminum horseshoe frame, designed to absorb energy in a collision, had done exactly that. It sacrificed itself, crumpling inwards and protecting the carbon tub behind it. In a strange way, this destruction was good news. The sacrificial design meant the core structure had survived. But rebuilding that horseshoe without factory specifications would require precision down to the millimeter. Radiators came out next, one by one, 4 of them, each showing signs of impact. Bent fins, cracked mounting tabs, slight warping. On most cars, replacement would be the obvious solution. But here, every radiator represented a cost that might never be recoverable. So instead of discarding them, Mat inspected each one for repair. Recoring, welding, straightening, time-consuming, but possible. Meanwhile, Alex watched closely. This wasn't just a project for him. It was personal. Buying the car back after the crash had already raised eyebrows. Many questioned the logic. But standing there now, Watching the Chiron being carefully dismantled rather than scrapped, the decision started to make sense. He wasn't just saving a car. He was preserving something meaningful. The carbon tub damage became the next focus. Under bright workshop lights, the weave pattern revealed stress marks, small fractures, cosmetic in some places, questionable in others. Bugatti would likely insist on full replacement. That's their philosophy, eliminate risk entirely. But Mat's approach was different. If the structural integrity could be restored safely, then replacement wasn't necessary. Repair would keep the original car alive rather than turning it into a rebuilt shell. As hours turned into days, the workshop filled with removed components. Carbon fiber panels leaned carefully against walls. Fasteners organized in labeled trays. Wiring harnesses laid out like intricate maps. The Chiron was no longer a complete car. It was a collection of engineering decisions waiting to be reversed. Diagnostics were revisited again. The engine faults remained cleared, which was a massive relief. The W16 had survived. That alone kept the project alive. But the transmission error stayed stubbornly present. 7 faults, all passive, all refusing to disappear. It suggested the control systems were detecting something physically wrong. And with the housing cracked, that made perfect sense. Mat knew the transmission would become the defining challenge. Rebuilding it without factory support meant measuring tolerances manually, verifying alignment, ensuring lubrication pathways remained intact. It was the kind of work usually reserved for manufacturers. But hey, it would be attempted inside a Miami workshop. The broken windscreen removal had already shown how different this car was. Even simple tasks required patience. The adhesive bond was incredibly strong. The glass shattered in sections. It wasn't graceful, but it was necessary. Every step forward meant removing another barrier. A trip to the Bugatti dealership confirmed what they already suspected. No parts without full factory involvement. No individual sales. No workaround. The rebuild would proceed entirely independent of Bugatti. That decision raised the stakes even higher. Every repair now had to be perfect. There was no safety net. Back in the workshop, fabrication discussions began. The twisted horseshoe frame would need to be recreated, templates measured, metal shaped, mounting points rebuilt. It was a kind of task that blends engineering with craftsmanship, not just assembling parts, but creating them. Despite the scale of the challenge, progress continued. Small victories mattered. A straightened bracket, a repaired mount, a confirmed alignment measurement. Each one meant the Chiron was moving closer to life again. But the biggest question still remained unanswered. Could the transmission actually be saved? Because if that component failed beyond repair, the entire project might stall indefinitely. Without parts access, alternatives would be limited. Mat's determination didn't change. If anything, it intensified. This wasn't just about fixing Alex's car anymore. It was about proving that even the most restricted, most exclusive hypercars could be rebuilt outside factory walls. Night fell over the Miami workshop. Tools rested. The Chiron sat stripped, silent, and vulnerable. But it no longer looked abandoned. It looked mid-transformation, because beneath the cracked transmission, damaged radiators, and twisted aluminum, the essence of the car still remained. And as long as that essence existed, the rebuild would continue. Somewhere between engineering and determination, a blacklisted Bugatti was slowly finding its second chance. The following morning, the workshop lights came back on, revealing the Chiron in a state few people in the world had ever seen. Panels removed, structure exposed, wiring hanging in precise bundles. It no longer looked like a finished hypercar. It looked like a machine caught between two lives, one as a crashed, blacklisted supercar, and another as something waiting to be reborn. Mat walked around it slowly, not rushing, because at this stage, speed doesn't help. Observation does. Every angle offered new information. Every exposed section told part of the story of how the impact traveled through the car. The front had absorbed the worst of it, but energy doesn't simply disappear. It transfers. And that's what concerned him most. Attention returned to the transmission area. With surrounding components removed, the cracks looked even more severe. Oil residue had settled into crevices, making it clear the casing had been compromised under pressure. In normal circumstances, a manufacturer would scrap the entire unit immediately. But hey, that option didn't exist. If the casing could be repaired and reinforced properly, the transmission might still function. If not, the rebuild would face its biggest obstacle yet. The team began carefully disconnecting the remaining cooling lines. The Chiron's cooling system is complex, designed to manage extreme heat from the W16 engine. Multiple radiators, intercoolers, and A-flow channels all working together. With several of them damaged, the system would need to be restored precisely. Even slight inefficiencies could cause overheating under load. It wasn't just about making the car run. It had to run correctly. As components came off, the sheer density of engineering became obvious. Every part seemed layered. Remove one panel, and 3 more systems appeared beneath it. This wasn't a car designed for quick service. It was designed for performance first, accessibility second. And that meant every repair required patience. Alex remained involved, watching closely. For him, seeing the Chiron stripped down was both exciting and nerve-wracking. Each removed piece made the rebuild feel more real, but also more fragile. There was no turning back now. The deeper they went, the more committed the project became. Mat started mapping out repair priorities. First, stabilize the structure. Second, rebuild the cooling system. Third, address the transmission casing. And finally, reassemble and test systems progressively. It wasn't a simple checklist. It was a strategy designed to reduce risk. Because with no factory support, mistakes couldn't be undone easily. The carbon fiber elements continued to impress. Even damaged sections showed incredible craftsmanship. The weave patterns aligned perfectly, layers bonded with precision. Repairing carbon fiber requires careful preparation, grinding damaged areas, layering new material, curing under controlled conditions. It's as much art as engineering. Mat knew this stage would demand time, but preserving the original tub was worth it. Meanwhile, diagnostic tools remained connected intermittently. The persistent transmission faults acted like a reminder. Even as physical repairs progressed, the electronics were waiting for confirmation that everything was back within tolerance. Modern hypercars rely heavily on software. If the system detects abnormal readings, it simply refuses to cooperate. Fabrication planning intensified. Measurements taken from the undamaged side of the horseshoe frame would guide reconstruction. Aluminum sections would need shaping, welding, and reinforcement. Accuracy mattered. Even a few millimeters off could affect panel alignment and cooling airflow. The damaged radiators were inspected again. Some could be recored. Others required bracket repairs. Each saved component reduced dependency on unavailable parts. It was a slow process, but it built momentum. Progress, even small, kept morale high. The workshop atmosphere evolved. What began as uncertainty turned into focus. Everyone understood the significance of the project. Rebuilding a blacklisted Bugatti wasn't just unusual. It was something few believed possible. That awareness added pressure, but also motivation. As afternoon light filtered through the workshop windows, the Chiron looked different again. More stripped, but also more organized. The chaos of damage was turning into a structured rebuild. Parts cleaned, labeled, and prepared for return. The car was slowly moving from destruction toward reconstruction. Mat paused briefly, looking at the exposed transmission once more. This would be the defining battle. Repairing it successfully would keep the project alive. Failure would force a new strategy. But either way, the attempt itself was historic. The day ended with tools set down, and the workshop quiet again. The Chiron remained incomplete, but no longer hopeless. Each removed panel, each measured dimension, each repaired bracket was another step toward proving that even a blacklisted hypercar could return. And as the lights dimmed, one thought lingered over the project. This wasn't just about fixing damage. It was about rewriting what people believed was possible. Somewhere inside that silent workshop, a Bugatti that had been written off by its own manufacturer was slowly